Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, Mary Beth, and thank you for so much, all of you that were part of the experience yesterday. It was moving for me, it was exciting for me, and I feel very welcome here. And I think this is a jewel that's been hidden under a bushel basket, and it's time for you all to come out. And I think it's really great that this particular ministry has been going on for so many decades and is so alive and so filled with wisdom and love. And thank you for the work that you're doing here. I think it's incredible how you're teaching full-time and then coming here and ministering to these folks. And I have a lot of respect for that. So thank you very much as well. So this morning, I want to talk to you about the what I'm calling the evolutionary impulse. And this evolutionary impulse is not something that happened just a long time ago. It's not something that's just happening at the furthest reaches of the cosmos. It's happening right here and right now. It's happening within you, within each of us, right here and right now. Whether or not you are aware of it, the evolutionary impulse is alive and well and active this morning. So I'd like to do a little experiment, if you're willing. I invite you to feel your heartbeat. However you do that, your heart or your neck or wrist or however you do that, just feel that life force in your body. So as you feel your heart, I invite you to consider this particular question. When did this heartbeat begin? When did this heartbeat begin? Some might say 30, 40, 50 years ago, 60, 70 years ago. Perhaps, but I would like to offer you the possibility that heartbeat that you're feeling right now began nearly 14 billion years ago with what scientists are now calling the Big Bang. The Big Bang that created not only the universe, created time and space, is being replicated many, many times per hour, per day, per minute within you. That Big Bang that created time, space, and the universe is creating you right now. You are the universe in miniature. All of the wisdom and intelligence and power that went into the creation of the universe from the Big Bang till today is present within your body, within your soul, within your mind, within your spirit. You are, quite literally, this is not a metaphor, scientists will tell you that you are made of stardust. Your body, every atom in your body was created at the center of a star. So you are a star, whether you know it or not. And you are 14 billion years old, whether you know it or not. And the wisdom, the learning, the intelligence that's been garnered over the last 14 billion years is within you and within your body, right here and right now. So you are the microcosm of the macrocosm. You are the universe within yourself. The same power, the same intelligence that created the universe is with you right now. I want to quote to you from one of my favorite authors by the name of Andrew Cohen. And he says, in those precious moments when we are most aware that something tugs at our hearts and beckons us to participate in life in a deeper purpose, that is infinitely greater than our personal world. Have you ever had that experience where you feel like you're being called to something that's so much bigger than you are? That you're in touch with something that's so much bigger than what we can see, what we can hear, and what we've ever experienced perhaps before. I continue with this quote. That energy that you experience, I keep bumping into this. Stay. That energy that is the evolutionary impulse, the impulse to an evolving consciousness. This is Andrew Cohn again. It is the same impulse that caused the universe to emerge from nothing 14 billion years ago. So here it is, and you are part of it, and it is part of you. So evolution is occurring around us, within us, before us, and will continue after us. Now, about 100,000 years ago, a gradual but powerful shift occurred on our planet. 3.5 billion years ago, life began on this planet. Life as we know it. Life in physical form. About 3.5 billion years ago. So the universe is about 14 billion years old. And about 3.5 billion years ago, about a fourth of that time, life has existed on this particular planet. Now, since the beginning of life on this planet, evolution has occurred biologically through what has been known as natural selection. But about 100,000 years ago, give or take 10,000 years, something very important began to happen. And that is the cutting edge of evolution. The cutting edge of the intelligence that's unfolding in our life forms began to shift. Began to shift from biological evolution to the evolution of consciousness. So, as life evolved, the form evolved, consciousness evolved, but biological form was the driving force until about 100,000 years ago, and consciousness in the form of Homo sapiens, which means wise being, actually means wise being. For some reason, somebody very optimistic about being it's Homo sapiens. So I keep reminding myself that's what we are, in spite of what it seems like sometimes. That is what began to drive evolution. So now, today, evolution will occur not by our biological changes, but by our changes in consciousness. It's psychology, it's spirituality that is at the cutting edge of evolution. It's no longer biology. In our world today, when we talk about evolution, we think about biological evolution, and we think of creation theory and all of the political stuff that's going on. But when I hear the word evolution, I think of consciousness evolving. Because if we look back over the last 100,000 years, our bodies have changed relatively little. Believe it or not, we don't look that much different. We may be dressed a little different, but our bodies are very, very similar. However, would you think maybe that our consciousness is a little different today than it was 100,000 years ago? Or even 100 years ago? All that you see is the result not only of our bodies and our biological evolution, but the evolution of our minds, the creative ability of the human consciousness. So now we find ourselves at another crucial juncture, and that is that evolution has shifted to the point where if we don't take the next step in our evolutionary process, we may not survive to get there. So throughout the course of human history and human evolution, there are critical junctures, crisis points. Crisis means, in Chinese language, a dangerous opportunity, danger and an opportunity. So every crisis involves danger. Every crisis involves an opportunity. So that there's a danger and there's an opportunity. The problem is that we have become so enamored with knowledge that we have failed to develop the corresponding wisdom to know how to use that knowledge. We have become so enamored with developing power that we have failed to cultivate the wisdom and the love needed to broker, to manage that power. So we have become like a 4-year-old child in the seat of a speeding, runaway semi-tractor trailer with a gun in the front seat and dynamite for the cargo, you say. We have the ability to destroy every living being on this planet. That's the power that we have. Do we have the wisdom not to do that? See, that is the question. So we have gained an enormous amount of knowledge about the external world. We have taken this intelligence that is this hard-won intelligence that's taken all of these many, many, many years to evolve. We have taken that, we have invested that most recently in the last 400 or 500 years into exploring our external world. And we've done a great job of it. I mean, science has done magical, marvelous, unbelievable things. And yet, we have so much knowledge of the world out there and so little knowledge of the world in here. We have become appallingly ignorant of ourselves. So this one-sidedness is threatening humanity itself. It's threatening our survival. Our world is dangerously, dangerously out of balance. You may have heard this statistic, for example, that 26 people, 26 human beings on this planet have as much wealth as the poorest 50% of the people on this planet. So 24 people own more, have more resources than half, 3.5 billion people, the poorest people. We cannot survive with that kind of imbalance. We cannot survive living the way we've been living. We must wake up. And yet, even those of us that say, yes, you're right, we must wake up, how do we do that? We keep going around in circles, it seems like. That, have you ever had one of those dreams where you think you're awake, but you're still sleeping? And you go to get out of bed and you find out that you're not in bed, you're somewhere else? That's kind of where we are today. It's become almost surrealistic, the predicament that we find ourselves in. So many people are saying, what's going on? This is just crazy. Well, it is crazy, but it has been crazy for a long time. This has been building up, and it's not just something that happened like that. It's something that's been happening over a period of many, many years. So it's time for us to wake up. We must wake up. The human mind that has been designed to help us survive is no longer our servant. It has become our master. And the human mind, I'm not talking about the divine mind, I'm talking about this intellectual mind, is a wonderful servant. It's like a computer. Marvelous, marvelous computer. And it's a great servant, but it's a very, very poor master. It's not something you want to run your life. It's here to serve us, not to own us. Waking up has become an evolutionary necessity, yet something is keeping us asleep. We seem to be bumping up against something and going around in circles. When we look at contemporary history, we can see quite easily. Something's out of kilter, something's wrong. We seem to be going nowhere fast. And yet nobody seems to have the answers. I mean, they got their answer, and these people got their answer, and that's part of the problem. Is that nobody has a solution. Everybody has an answer. Nobody has a solution. The human mind is who we think we are. We have become identified with the mind. We, at one time in our evolution, used to think of ourselves in terms of physical bodies. But the mind that has evolved to help us survive, we have become identified with it. And so, to let go of our identification with the mind, the human mind, is very, very frightening. Because it feels like we're letting go of everything we know. In our seminar yesterday afternoon, someone talked about the practice in Zen. One of the Zen practices is what they call don't know mind, practicing not knowing. That is a challenging practice because the human mind gets very frightened when it doesn't know. You know, if you went outside and your car wasn't where you parked it and you didn't know where your car was, I would imagine there'd be an emotional response to that. There would be for me too. To say, what happened? See, when the mind is not in control, it's very frightening. And indeed, the mind can serve us. But when we don't know what we don't know, then we're not going to go beyond where we are. Evolution is calling us to wake up to a greater reality, but we have become identified with our survival patterns. These same patterns that have helped us to survive are keeping us locked up. What has become a tool has become a weapon. What has become that which saved us has become that which is suffocating us. Many years ago, about 50, 60 years ago, at the National Zoo in Washington, D.C., they received a gift from the nation of China, I believe it was. It was a very rare Siberian tiger. Beautiful Siberian tiger, and its name was Mohini. Female tiger called Mohini. And in the 60s, you know, the animals were put in cages. That's the way the zoos did it, is they put them in 10 by 10, 12 by 12 cages. And Mohini, like the other big cats, were put in a cage, standard size cage. And of course, Mohini was very powerful and had lots of energy, lots of strength, and was a wild animal. And where does all of that energy go when you're locked up in a cage? Well, Mohini would pace back and forth, back and forth. Perhaps some of you have seen the big cats do that when they're in a cage. They'll pace back and forth. She paced out this figure 8 compulsively, night and day, for many, many years. Then the day came along when there was this revolution in zookeeping, when they began to put animals in their natural habitat. So they thought, this is going to be really exciting. Take her out of the cage, put her in this big compound of many, many acres with trees and a pond and a cave and grass, all sorts of stuff. She'll be super happy, right? So they took Mohini out of the cage, released her into her new environment, and guess what happened? She ran into the furthest corner of the compound and began pacing back and forth. The same figure 8s, 10 by 10. She did that for the rest of her life. She wore out the grass, never saw the rest of the compound, and she died before that changed. So, how many of us, both as individuals and as a species, We have learned to cope, to survive. We've developed our pacing. We've developed our patterns. This is who I am. This is what works. This is what I'm going to stick with. So when the bars are gone, we still continue that pattern. Because the bars, at one time, were physical bars that kept Mohini in the cage. But pretty soon, what happened? She internalized those bars. Those bars were in her nervous system, her brain. So that when she was released, in her brain, she was still locked up. She didn't even know the difference. And so it is with humanity today. We have been pacing for centuries. And even though freedom is possible, even though at one level we may want freedom, there's a part of us that's so attached. Because to let go of our limitations is very frightening. Perhaps you've heard this quote from Marianne Williamson. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Now that would seem hard to believe. Yet, what happens when we step into the fullness of who we can be? We let go of who we were. We have to die to the old. Now that death is only an imaginary death, and yet it feels very real. That's what's so bizarre. Because those bars are only in our mind. But it feels like those bars are real. So that when we let go of our old identity, it feels like we're falling through space. It feels like we're nothing to hold on to. It feels like we're in this vast unknown territory. And that can be very frightening, you say. It can also be helpful if we know that that is not a permanent state of affairs. That's simply an experience of what happens when we let go of the past. And this particular pattern is not unique to us. It's been going on ever since the beginning of the universe, ever since the beginning of life on Earth. And so I'd like to conclude with this quote from Nikos Kazantzakis. It's a fairly long quote, so please bear with me. Do you know who Nikos Kazantzakis is?
No.
How many saw Zorba the Greek? Yes. That's Nikos Kazantzakis wrote Zorba the Greek. And you may hear Zorba in some of these words here. He says, blowing through heaven and earth, and in our hearts, and in the heart of every living thing is a gigantic breath, a great cry, which we call God. Plant life wished to continue its motionless sleep next to stagnant waters, but the cry leaped up within it and violently shook its roots and said, away, away, let go of the earth, walk. Had that tree been able to think and to judge and to speak, it would have cried, I don't want to. What you're urging me to do is impossible. But the cry, without pity, kept shaking its roots, shouting, away, let go of the earth, walk. It shouted in this way for thousands of eons. And eventually, as a result of struggle, desire, life escaped the motionless tree, was liberated, evolved into animal form. First it appeared like worms, at home in water and mud. We're just fine here, they said. We're at peace. We're not budging. We're not going anywhere. We love living in the slime, in the swamp, safe here. But the terrible cry hammered itself into their loins and says, leave the mud, stand up, give birth to your betters. And lo, after thousands of years, man emerged, trembling on his still unsolid legs. This human being is a centaur. His hoofs, his equine hoofs are planted in the ground, but his body from breast to head, from heart to head, is tormented by the merciless cry. He has been fighting for thousands of years to draw himself like a sword out of his animalistic scabbard. Now he is fighting to draw himself out of his human scabbard. Okay? So every time there's a leap from non-organic matter to living beings, from vegetation to animal life, from animal life to human life, and now, what's next? I don't know, but we're going to find out sometime, and we are part of that. But we are frightened. We don't want to stand up. Man calls out in despair and he says, "Where can I go? I've reached the pinnacle. Beyond is the abyss. What else is there?" The cry stands up. He shouts, "I am beyond. I am beyond. Stand up. Stand up and evolve." So we're being called in human history, both in the past and in the present, is this struggle between these forces of the cry hammering itself into our hearts and minds, and this fearful part of ourself, our knees that shake and say, "I can't, I don't know how." It's frightening. So in closing, evolution no longer occurs entirely unconscious of itself. We must now begin to understand the process, and even more so, we must become the process. We must become the cutting edge of evolution. We must become what some authors call conscious evolutionaries. You know what a revolutionary is. Well, would you like to be an evolutionary? You know, there's an evolution happening. Would you like to join it and become an evolutionary? We must become conscious evolutionaries to bring forth the needed global transformation. We are the pioneers. We are blazing the trail that will be followed for generations to come. And so we are laying down the tracks that will be followed by our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and many generations behind us. So even though what you and I do may seem very small, it can be the spark that ignites a fire that may last for thousands and thousands of years. So I invite you to join with me in taking that thought into your heart and into your mind. And thank you so much for listening, for being present this morning, and for being part of this great ministry. God bless you.